Hey there, my name's Drew Brashler, and in this video, I want to show you about the Combinator, which is a multi-band compressor built into your Behringer WING Compact, and Behringer WING rack. In fact, if you have an X32, you even have this as the dual combinator or stereo combinator. But on the Wing, the UI, the user interface, is so much improved. It is one of my favorite plugins to use, and especially on a vocal, which is where I'm going to show you it in use today. So if you're brand new to my channel, I'm all about helping you feel more confident with your production gear no matter where you're starting from. So let's actually see how this thing works. Now, in the Combinator, it is within the effects rack of the Behringer X32. So you do have to use one of your 16 effects racks to use this effect. And so I'm going to pull up my vocal and I'm going to go to one of my inserts. And so I'm going to pull up my insert right here, and then I'm going to select the effects processor that I want to use. In this case, I'm going to use Effects 9. I'm going to go ahead and turn it on and then go to effects type. And then from here, I'm going to go find Combinator. And so once we have this pulled up, there are a bunch of adjustments. And the nice thing is, on the X32, to select between the bands, we would have to go in with a knob and select low, low mid, mid, high, in which case on the Wing, all we have to do is just press on the different things. And so we have 5 bands of compression. So this is a multi-band compressor. So what a multi-band compressor does is it takes the audio spectrum and it separates the sections of the spectrum into multiple bands, and it compresses just that section of the band, and then it blends all of them back together. Now, there are 2 types of slopes that we can select on the Combinator. There is a 48 dB per octave and a 12 dB per octave. And the difference is that the slope when this switches up is a faster slope in between the different bands. If we want to have more of a transition bandwidth between the bands, then we would have this switch at the low setting, which would give us 12. In which case, for me, I'm wanting that really tight bandwidth. And so then we have a number of different adjustments on this. We have an attack time. Now the attack time goes between 0 and 20. Now, the attack time is preset on specific settings, and there is a dual style attack on this where it clamps down and then it clamps down more. And so as we adjust this, the lower this number, the slower the attack. The higher this number, the faster the attack. So you really do need to use your ears and listen in for the attack. So again, if we want a slower attack, then we have this at a lower number. If we want a faster attack, then we have this at a higher number. We then have an automatic release setting that we can set here, or if we want to specify our release times, we can set that. So we can go anywhere from 20 milliseconds all the way up to 3 seconds of time. Now then we have this thing called SBC, which is Spectrum Balance Control. Now this is an automatic makeup gain for the individual bands of the multi-band compressor. And so when SBC is on, the makeup of this multi-band is bandwidth by bandwidth adjusted automatically depending on the time that we set. Now, the SBC time, again, is between 1 and 10, 10 being faster and 1 being slower. Now, this is an interesting makeup for a multi-band compressor. Normally, multi-band compressors do not have this spectrum balance control where it will take the compression, apply compression, and then bring the volume of that section or that band back up to 0. And so it is a very interesting sound to it, and I'll let you guys hear it. But for my case with vocals, I'm actually going to have SBC turned off. The next setting that we have is our threshold. This is a global threshold for the entire multi-band compressor. And so we can go between 0 and -40. And we have a dedicated knob right here for it. Now, on the band-by-band controls, we also have a threshold. Now, this is set off of the global threshold as a trim. So if we have this global threshold set at -10 dB. And I have this threshold for my band 1 set at -5 dB, then that means the threshold of this band is actually at -15 for this channel. And so this is just a trim. So you can go +10 all the way to -10, and typically I'm leaving this at 0 for now. Then we have a global makeup gain. Now, this makeup gain can go down to -10 or up to +10. And again, this gain knob is just like you taking the channel fader and turning it up. So if you have a channel that's close to feeding back, be careful about the amount of makeup gain that you add, because turning this up and adding gain is the same thing as you taking your fader and raising it. So if you're already on the verge of feedback, if you add makeup gain here, you will reach that feedback much faster. And then the last thing that we have is a global ratio. So we have anywhere from 1.1 to 1 all the way up to 100 to 1. And so our limiting starts at 10 to 1. So we can set a 10 to 1 or 100 to 1 if we want some limiting, or we can set it at a lower ratio. Now, a ratio is how much compression is actually applied to that channel. So for a 2 to 1 compression, for every 2 dB above the threshold point we go, there is a 1 dB rise in the output. If we go to 4 dB above, then it would be 2 dB on the out. And so if we set this to a 4 to 1 compression ratio, then that means for every 4 dB above that threshold point, it will go up by 1 dB on the output. And then if we got to 8 dB above, then it would be 2 dB up. So the higher the compression ratio, the more compression there will be. Just keep that in mind. The very last thing that we have is a mix knob here, which gives us the ability of blending in the unprocessed channel with the processed channel. So if we have this set to 50, that means that this is an equal blend between the unaffected, uncompressed channel and the compressed channel. So we can blend in these two to create a sort of parallel style compression. The very last thing that we have is a couple switches in here. So we have a bandwidth knob and then a bypass and solo. And then we also have the gain. So for each of these individual bands, we have all of these same adjustments. So we have a threshold, which is again a trim off of the global threshold. We then have a gain. So I can actually go and apply gain or cut to this EQ section with this bandwidth that I have selected on this band 2. We can bypass a compressor if we want to. And then we can also solo up and listen to the compression that's happening on that specific band. The solo is very helpful for setting where we want our spectrum to be for these different bands. And then that comes us to our width. Now the width is really helpful because we can select more or less width on this band. And so we can break up the frequency spectrum to have the specific parts of this vocal be compressed by the different bands that we have of this combinator. So let me go ahead and get some settings here, and then we can actually start going into this. So I'm going to choose a 5 to 1 compression ratio. I'm going to set my attack up a little bit higher, around 15. I'm then going to set my release around 90 milliseconds. And let's go ahead and start listening to this on this vocal. Now we can go ahead and solo up our band. So the one thing that I want to target is the S's portion of this vocal. So when he said spirit, there was a big peak that we heard. And then the other portion of the vocal that I want to set is the low end. I'm wanting to contain the amount of proximity effect that this vocal has. When that vocalist is getting really close into that microphone, there is more low end that happens. That's called proximity effect. And so then the farther that he goes away from that microphone, the less low end there is. That's why I'm always asking for my vocalist to get really nice and close up into that microphone. That way they get a very warm sounding voice to it. And so in our case here, I'm wanting to adjust the bandwidth of my band 1 to make sure to get all of the low end of the vocal. Now notice we have maxed out at 50 here. And so what I can do is I can then go to my next band and tighten this up. So that's about the area of the vocal that I'm wanting to target the low band for. This is going to be a little bit of the mid. Now, one thing to mention about the solo is it is a destructive solo. So whoever is listening to the opposite end of this will be hearing that destructive solo. So if you have it on your console and you are mixing in a live room and you hit solo, it will come through the PA. So just keep that in mind. But so now that we have set the bandwidth of these different bands for this vocal, what I'm then going to do is start applying some threshold down so we can actually get some compression on this vocal.
But then you rose up like a lion. You beat the grave, hold the stone, let the light in. Lord, I'm praying you do the same with me. Cause you're still robbing grace, still breaking chains.
Now, if we go to our attack and take this to a lower number, we can see and hear that the compression is a lot slower. But if I take it high, it's a lot faster.
Won't you set me free? Rob the grave in me. But then you rose up like a lion. You beat the grave, hold the stone, let the light in. Lord, I'm praying you do the same with me. Cause you're still robbing grace.
Now, the thing that you'll notice is that the compression sounds really natural with this. And that's because the Combinator is taking the whole audio spectrum, breaking it up into multiple bands, and then compressing those different bands and then blending it back together, which is nice. So if there is an S that comes through with a really sharp syllable, it's going to only be compressing that upper range where that S is. And then, for instance, if he says praying, a P has a plosive sound to it. There's a rush of wind that comes out of a mouth when you have a P letter. And so the low band of our Combinator is going to go ahead and just compress that section of this. And that's why it sounds really natural. Now, when we turn our SBC back on, and I'm going to turn the speed up, and I'm going to apply a little bit more threshold on this. It gives it a very interesting sound. Here's with SBC off. Now that's too much compression, but now what the SBC is doing is it's taking whatever compression that I have and band by band applying makeup gain to get it back to that 0 point. Now, the other option is having SBC turned off and applying a global makeup gain here, which is the style of compression that I am looking for when I'm adding this to a vocal. There are going to be some instances where you want to use SBC, maybe on some tracks, for instance, like some backing tracks, where you want to have different compression on the global portion of the tracks, but then have it still blended at a nice level. For instance, applying more compression to the low end, but then keeping that volume the same, which is very nice. Now, the other thing that I want to mention is that each band has the ability of gaining or lowering as far as EQ goes. And so when we listen to this, if I was want to increase the high end, I can, or decrease. So maybe I want to have a nice, really present low end on this vocal. What I could do is I could add in gain and then lessen my threshold. And so what I have done with that is I've turned up the low end on the quieter portions of that vocal where he's not hitting that threshold. But then I've lowered the threshold point of the specific band lower than the original threshold point of the global side. And so I'm creating more compression when he's getting louder. However, when he's quieter, I've increased the actual low end of the vocal. Now, this isn't something that I would choose to do for this particular song, but if we wanted to do that, we definitely can. Now, one thing that I want to make sure of is that my makeup gain is set correctly. So let's go ahead and listen to this vocal and insert and uninsert the combinator to make sure that my overall volume is still level.
But then you rose up like a lion.
Which is quiet, so I'm going to go ahead and boost this up.
Lord, I'm praying you do the same with me, 'cause you're still robbing grace, still breaking.
All right, let's go ahead and add in the rest of the band and listen to this without the compressor.
But then you rose up like a lion. You beat the grave, rolled the stone, let the light in. Lord, I'm praying you do the same with me, 'cause you're still robbing grace, still breaking.
And let's listen to it with.
But then you rose up like a lion. You beat the grave, rolled the stone, let the light in. Lord, I'm praying you do the same with me, 'cause you're still robbing grace, still breaking chains. Your resurrection power lives in me. I come.
Now, this is a great compressor to use on vocals, and just keep in mind that when we go to our effects section, we only have 16 effects racks here. So you do need to prioritize what type of effects that you want to use. Now, keep in mind that we can place this combinator in any of these slots, but the first 8 slots are primarily for time-based effects. So reverbs, delays, choruses, flangers, that sort of thing. So when we're prioritizing our effects racks, usually I'm leaving the first 4 for some sort of time-based effect. So a reverb, a delay, both of those would be for vocals, then a drum verb and an instrument verb. And then I'm going to be focusing on my next 8 slots for my vocals. And then I use my last 4 slots for any other additional things that I need to use. For instance, loudness for a stream output, that sort of thing. But because I only have 8 vocals, I can use these 8 slots specifically for the combinator for my vocals. Now, I hope this video was helpful for you today. If you do happen to have any questions, or there's a video that you're hoping that I would make on the Wing or really any of the production equipment that's out there, please post that in the comment section down below, as I'm always reading through those comments to find videos that can be helpful for you. If you haven't already, make sure to check out my website at drewbrashler.com. Otherwise, I hope you have a great day.